I need to get info. And so what happened is that that person highlighted to me the main thing is impact, impact, impact. I don't know if it's because I was mainly in the civic engagement, but even with all tracks, you need to highlight your impact, guys. You need to tell people what you have done. How have you impacted people based on your work? And what are you going to do in the future to continue to impact people? So the idea is that, and it goes back to the essential kind of understanding of the Mandela Washington Fellowship, is that we are young leaders, first and foremost, who want to create an impact and who are already creating impact to improve Africa, to build Africa. So it's just going back to that mindset and understanding that, okay, based on that, how am I going to highlight impact in my application? So first thing is impact. The second thing is application. Like as Freddie was just saying, is that, you know, what are the examples that you have? State those examples in your application. You know, it's all about stating whatever you have done, how have you impacted people, what are you currently doing, et cetera, et cetera. State your accomplishments. As the city was saying, that your accomplishments is pivotal. That's what makes you, basically, is that having those accomplishments. Do not be humble about it. I think we find that we need to be humble when it's like, no, express your accomplishments. And Lesedi said it perfectly well. Like, based on the number of people that applied, a few only get selected. So you have to literally state why you are the person for this fellowships. That's the second thing. The third thing is that I know this is a minor thing, and I don't know if it's the academic part of me or academic brain, is that you need to look at proofreading, guys, your application. So, and it's always nice to see as the reader that, okay, you know what, this is an easy application to like get through in terms of like reading it through. So definitely proofread. I know that some of our colleagues here are from French-speaking nations, which can be very difficult, and salute to the French-speaking people because English is difficult. So now you have to write in English. That's a whole nother level. So, you know, definitely check whether it's Grammarly. Even if you're an English-speaking person, English is difficult as a language in general, but definitely check, proofread, make sure that there's no grammar mistakes or anything of that nature, just so that the application flows as well when people are reading. So yeah, definitely those are my three tips. And I come from Durban. I see that somebody's from Durban as well. So Mobile, I think it's Mobile from Durban. And I see there's somebody who's a fellow lecturer at VOA. So I see the chats there. So that's cool. But yeah, that's it, guys. That's me.
Thank you so much, Lee. And I think in line with what you're saying in terms of impact, I'm going to throw the first question to you, which is part of the long essays. It says, provide an overview of your major professional accomplishments from the past year, as well as long-term goals and aspirations. What motivates you in the fields that you do?
Yes. Oh, I like that. That was actually a hard question that they threw at us. I'm not gonna lie, because I divided it into three parts. So the first part was accomplishments. So I literally looked at what did I do last year. So I basically briefly just spoke about how I was excited that I accomplished, and it could be anything, guys. Like your professional accomplishments could be that I got a promotion at work, or I moved to a great job, or like I got my degree. Whatever it may be, you highlight that accomplishment, and then moving on to you know, what are you seeking to do in the next 3 or 4 years, or whatever it may be. So I divide into three parts. I look into what is my previous accomplishments, what am I seeking to accomplish later, and then once I look into that, then I ended off by you know, why did I go for this part? So why did I select, you know, academia, for instance? Maybe it's because I studied my degree in masters and I tutored and whatever. And so I was so passionate about academia. So I basically divided that into three parts, and just paying attention to these various parts so that you answer the question in its entirety. And I don't know if that was helpful, but hopefully that was helpful.
Hopefully it was. Anyone has a follow-up question for any of the people who've spoken so far, any of my colleagues who've spoken so far, please do drop it in the chat and we'll get to them at a later stage. So they're not going anywhere, believe me. If you do have a question, drop it in there and then we can get to them later. Thank you so much, Lee.
Well, thank you, Amanda.
question for you as well. Next we'll have Kiara. Kiara will also shortly introduce herself and then also give us her top 3 tips of killing this application.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you. Good evening, leaders. And I say that because throughout this application, you really want to step into your power of showing that you are a leader already. This Mandela Washington Fellowship is not looking for people who are trying to be leaders. They're looking for people who are already leaders and taking the best of the best and really honing you so that you can go back to Africa and implement all the things you learned. So my name's Kiara. I'm from Cape Town and I run a social enterprise business. So I'll be really talking about the business leadership track. And I just want to start off by saying that I applied in 2019 and I made it to the interview stage and then I didn't make the final list. And when I reapplied last year, I changed some things in my application and I want to share that with you because the first time around, I thought I had to answer everything like as much as I could, give as much depth to each essay question. And so for some, I was talking about my business, some I was talking about the social impact. When they asked about conflict, I started talking about my involvement in Fees Must Fall. And I thought I was covering all these bases, but actually the next time around, I tailored my entire application specifically to my social enterprise business. And that really relates back to what my colleagues have been saying about make it very specific and authentic about you. So just to go into my tips, the first one, I would say research the Mandela Washington Fellowship. And I kept going back to their website as I was filling out my essay questions to see exactly how they're wording what this fellowship is about and what you're going to gain, because the US government is making a huge investment in you and they want you to show that you're actually here to learn and take back these things. So for example, with my social enterprise business, I spoke about how even though America is a first world country, we have a lot of things in common when it comes to the socioeconomic challenges we face, and how I would love to learn more about social enterprises and how business models are working in America and how I can learn about those business models and bring it back to South Africa. So really trying to show that the US has something that you can gain from them, but also can you offer something to your cohort? So for example, within my business leadership cohort, we were at the University of Texas studying in the business school, and there was 22 of us, and every single one of us was running some sort of social business. And we could all learn from each other in that space. So if you can also share your experiences and how you could also help others gain from what you know, I think that would also make your application quite strong. My second tip would be to, just to reiterate, give realistic examples of the work you've done, but also if you can add some statistics, basically add meat to the bone. So I work in the music education field. And so when I talk about the problems that our education system faces, I'm really specific. I talk about the actual communities that we're working with. I talk about the number of kids that we work with. And so I make it really tangible for the reader to see that the work I'm doing is not just some airy-fairy answers trying to save the education system. It's like very specific, and I can give you like actual numbers of kids and the communities they come from. So really try and give realistic examples and add as much meat to the bone of your questions. And then just, back to what I was talking about in the beginning is try and relate it to your business. If you're running a social business, or even if you are not running a business, but you want to be maybe in the future, really try and tailor your whole application to one thread so that when the reader is reading it, each question, each essay that they're reading from you is kind of building on the next one. So that question about conflict that in the previous year where I didn't make it, I talked about Fees Must Fall. this time around, I spoke about a specific issue, an incident that happened in my business, where there was conflict between some people in my organization, and I showed how I used my leadership skills to resolve that issue. So yeah, really building a picture about you and making it quite a clear thread that builds on each essay question, and not making it kind of random and just trying to say nice things about all the social issues around you, because we know we face a lot of social issues in South Africa. But if you can really pick one lane and focus on that, I think you would have quite a strong application.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kira. I actually have a great question from you from the 2023 application, and it goes with the conflict one that you've mentioned. You've now mentioned how you made a mistake in your previous one and how answering that. So there is a question regarding how you've kind of, dealt with conflict, how you use your leadership skills to deal with conflict. I'm just going to read it, and then you can give us your best tips on how to nail this question specifically. So it says, Nelson Mandela was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for working with leaders of the South African government to agree on a peaceful transition to multi-plenary rule and an end to apartheid, demonstrating that leaders can achieve progress despite different views or identities. Describe a situation where you used your leadership skills to resolve a conflict or disagreement. How do you encourage respectful discussion when working with people from different backgrounds, identities, or perspectives?
Thanks. So I'll just share exactly what I would have said. And basically, in my organization, there's people that come from different backgrounds, there's different races, and we put on an event for kids. It was like a school concert festival. And our artistic director is a white lady. She comes with a lot of privilege, and she didn't really understand that the way that she was talking to some of our volunteers was quite demanding, and made them feel like, she has unrealistic expectations of this team. And so there was a disparity between the way that she thought and the way that our volunteers were being felt at this event. And so understanding that people have different perspectives, different backgrounds, and that sometimes you might need to call that person out. And that takes leadership in itself, is to say to that person, look, you're coming from a place of privilege. You need to understand that our volunteers are here serving the community at this event, and you can't treat them in this way. And then also what I did after that was we had a debrief session where I gave space for all of our staff and volunteers who were in the hierarchy in our organization. They were below her, so they would not have had a chance to actually address her or call her out. So I opened up that space in an informal debrief session after the event, where I gave everyone a chance to talk and voice their anger or however they were feeling in this space. And so I think when I answered that question, I really demonstrated that as a leader, I created a space for everyone to have a voice and address that specific issue. And that manager, that lady, had to also do some reflection within herself, but it was creating that space for everyone to have a voice that was how I resolved that specific conflict.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Kira. I think what you're saying is really just be specific and give an example of a time where you resolved conflict, and be very specific in that. So thank you so much for that, for those tips, and also for your best practice in answering this question. Next up, we both have people from business leadership and civic engagement speak. So now we'll have someone who is from the public management track, and Ayanda Kunene will be next in talking about her 3 top tips on nailing this application. So Ayanda, over to you. You'll shortly introduce yourself as well, give us your top 3 tips, and then I'll also throw you with a question from the 2023 application.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, okay, I can't seem to open my video, but I'll go on. So
it was open. It was open.
Was it? Okay, yes,
cool.
Awesome. Okay. So I was in the public management track because because of my work as a pharmacist in the public health space. and I was placed in the University of Minnesota. So that's in Minneapolis. And yeah, so it was a really great experience, I think, particularly for me, because I met different people in different disciplines. So that just like opened my mind up to how all of the disciplines like are interrelated. For example, we had people like from agriculture, from politics, and that kind of thing. So it was really a great opportunity. And so I'm going to go to my 3 guidelines that I'd make suggestions on. So the first one is, if you can, go Google like the STAR approach of answering like essay questions. So what that means is you look at the situation. So you're going to talk about a situation that you found yourself in, and the task that you undertook to solve this particular situation. And then the next one is the action. So if you found yourself in this situation, what action did you take to try and fix it? Because I found that even in the interview, what they asked me was like to identify a certain situation that I found myself in, and what I did and what the results were. So the STAR approach basically is for you to identify a situation, the task, the action, and the results. So it helps if you go and like you, especially in the health sector, you look at programs that you've worked for. You look at the impact that you've had in the community. If you're with a professional body, maybe try identify the issues that you guys are facing in the profession and how you address those issues. And my second one would be, I think it's also been mentioned already, don't be modest. Use your experiences to demonstrate your leadership abilities. You must remember there are lots of people who are in the health industry. So what makes you stand out? What drives you? What makes you wake up every morning and say, I want to make a change, that kind of thing. And the third one that's also been mentioned is ask someone to proofread your work. When you're done with your essays, get a friend, get a colleague, get anyone to read through your work and maybe just give you like input on what you could change, what you're missing. And another thing that I wanted to talk about was align whatever it is that you're working on with the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as African Union Agenda 2063 goals. So what that will do is it will show what you're going to do when you come back. So you've identified the issues in the health system of your country or just like the general African continent. How are you going to play a role in addressing those issues? So that's like something else that you need to look into. Just like merge the two agendas, the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the African Union Agenda 2063. So what I'd say is you need to do a lot of reading. Read, and just be confident, know what you're talking about when you go for the interview, and just identify programs that you've worked on that have had an impact in your community. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ayanda. I'm going to throw you a question because it has COVID-19 in it and you're in the health sector. Yes. It just makes sense to me to give you that question. One of the questions, and this is part of the short essays, it says, strong leaders demonstrate resilience in the face of challenges. The repercussions of the COVID-19 global health pandemic, economic crisis, and conflict pose significant challenges, both globally and locally. How have you demonstrated resilience during challenging times? What lessons have you learned from the experience, and how are you applying these lessons in your current work? How would you suggest people tackle that question?
Thank you. That's a great one. And that's actually one that I got like a similar question in my interview. So it was just post like COVID, and they asked me like what challenges I found in the workplace that were COVID related. So mine was initially there was a lot of resistance around vaccination. And what I did was I identified a gap for education, because if people don't want to get vaccinated, you need to sort of like understand where they're coming from. There could be like religious aspects, there could be like health aspects. Some people genuinely can't get vaccinated because of health conditions that they have. So you need, as a leader, you need to be open-minded. You need to be aware of all of these aspects that could be contributing to people's reluctance to vaccination. So the the situation that I used in my interview was how I arranged for our team. I arranged for a doctor to come and just like basically speak to our team, allay like some of the fears that they may have around COVID vaccination. And afterwards, we actually had an improvement in the vaccination state, in the vaccination statistics in our team, because people were a bit more open to vaccination because now they were armed with knowledge and they understood the importance of vaccination. So you need to show initiative and the fact that you also open-minded and you don't force things down on people, but you provide them with education for them to make informed choices.
Great, thank you so much. Like part of the question at the end, and I'll just ask you to do this one, is that what lessons have you learned from this experience and how are you applying these lessons in your current work? I'm not necessarily asking you that question, but it's like if someone is going to obviously talk about what resilience means to them and how they're going to tackle such challenges, how would you tackle the last part of the question in terms of how you've learned from those experiences and how you're actually putting those into your current work? How would you suggest someone tackles that question?
I would say the lessons I've learned are the importance of collaboration, especially in the healthcare sector, to understand that the different stakeholders in the healthcare sector need to work together to implement change. So when you've got your nurses, your doctors, your pharmacists, and also take into consideration patients, you also need to respect like patients' autonomy, and you need to just like take them as people who are able to make decisions for themselves. So I would speak on the importance of collaboration from like professionals as well as the patients.
That's a good one. Thank you so much, Ayanda. Next, we will have Thandeka Chauke, who was in civic engagement track. She will also just shortly introduce herself as well and give us her top 3 tips on nailing this application.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry that my background is so dark. I don't know how that happened. But yes, my name is Thandeka Chauke. I am a human rights lawyer. I currently work for an organization called Lawyers for Human Rights. And my focus is on refugee rights, on statelessness and immigration justice. And I also run a voluntary organization that supports migrant women and children living in South Africa. I was under the civic engagement track and a university in for the fellowship. Yeah, so people, let me just switch off my video because my network says it's unstable. But I think people have touched on a lot of the substantive sort of tips that I was going to give. So I think I'll focus more on more technical tips. The first one, some of them are repetition, but for different reasons, is, once again, emphasizing on doing some background research into the fellowship and what it's about, really understanding what the Mandela Washington Fellowship is, what the Yali Network is, and what they're trying to achieve. Use the website. The website has so many useful resources and pages. For example, the frequently asked questions pages. They have some tips on interview tips that you can also adapt to your application process. The fellowship directory is also a great resource. You can go through that just to learn more about previous alumni, what they were focused on, what they wish to achieve out of the fellowship and what they're doing now. But it's also a great resource to contact people who are, for example, within the track that you want to apply for, or people from your own country, and just to see if they'll speak to you or give you some advice around their applications. My second tip would be to read the questions properly. Don't just jump into answering the questions, but go through all of the questions. Make sure you've read them properly. Make sure you answer or you respond to all elements of the question. You'll see that most of the questions are not direct questions. They have maybe 3 or 4 parts to them. So you want to make sure that you're dealing with every aspect of the question. Try not to repeat the question and your answer because already you have a limited word count. So you want to make full use of those limited words you have to respond. Also try not to repeat what is already in your CV, because your CV can be an alternative for you to fully flesh out what you actually do. So if there is something that's already noted in your CV, make sure you prioritize what you put in your answers. The other thing which I think is very important and underrated, linked to the issue on social media, is also updating your LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, I would highly recommend that you create one. There's so many resources online on tips on how to have an engaging LinkedIn profile, make sure it's professional, and make sure, once again, that it reflects who you are and what you do. Also, in looking at your LinkedIn and your CV, highlighting volunteerism and community service, I think that's very big for anyone who's a leader. They need to demonstrate some sort of servant leadership. If you don't have any volunteerism or community service experience, maybe you can consider highlighting examples where you've provided mentorship to young people or group of people. Yeah, guys, I think those are my top 3 tips.
Thank you so much, Thandi. I think aligned to what you're talking about with community service, there is literally one last question and it's on community service. So I'll just bring that one to you. It says, Nelson Mandela said, a fundamental concern for others and in our individual or community lives would go a long way in making the world a better place. So we passionately dreamt of. Public and community service are essential responsibilities for leaders. What changes or other improvements do you hope to implement in the communities that you engage through your work? How are you working towards this or these goals now? And what else do you hope to accomplish in the future?
Thanks, Amanda. So I think a key starting point is for you to be able to identify who the community is to you, who are the beneficiaries of whatever service or whatever product you're going to be providing. So, and you have to be very specific. You can't just say children. I mean, you can narrow it down as far as saying migrant children. I'm using that example because I'm biased towards my work. But you can even say migrant children from poor socioeconomic backgrounds. Once you've identified that community, you also need to be clear about what your goal is. What is the social ill? What is the challenge you're trying to address? And what are the barriers? What is the root problem? So for instance, it could be addressing access to education for migrant children. The barriers could be issues around legal documentation or access to funding. And then you'd break it down to say, okay, how are you working towards this goal now? So it might be already a component of the work you're already doing. Perhaps you're already doing some advocacy work. Perhaps you're right at the beginning where you're still mapping the problem, developing a baseline, and identifying the communities you actually want to help within a specific geographical location. And then from that, you move on to how you intend to address it overall. Like, what are your aspirations? What do you hope to accomplish for this community in the future? So whether it's empowerment, it's education or upliftment, and then you have to be specific about that too, whether ultimately you want to be addressing law and policy reform, or you want to be engaging in fundraising opportunities that allow these children not only to access primary education, but maybe going as far as tertiary education. So I think it's also a great example of a question that you can break down into specific components to make sure that you're answering a full question.
Yeah, and I think some of these questions can be quite long. So I think your technical tips in being very mindful of the word count and being very reading the questions properly before you answer them have been quite great. Thank you so much, Thandi. And last but not least on our panel today, we've got Chaba Tsubela, who was also in the public management track. So over to you. You'll shortly introduce yourself and then you'll let us know what your 3 tips are for the application for the 2023 MWF.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to see some of my fellow alumni. It's been, I think we last saw each other at the airport or something like that. But good evening to everyone and to the prospective applicants. I just want to wish you well as you embark on this process. My name is Chaba Tsubela. I'm a public servant. I work for national government. So I was obviously in the public management track. I was at the Bridgewater State University in Massachusetts, just like a few minutes out of Boston. I'll go straight to the top 3 tips because I'm mindful of time as well. The first one is that be prepared to talk about your strengths, your achievements, and your values. I think all my colleagues have already elaborated on that in some form or another. You need to talk about your strengths because that gives the reader an insight in your personality, and there is a specific personality profile that they are trying to attract. So they're trying to see what kind of person you are, what kind of aspirations, what kind of discipline or what values you bring as a person to whatever that you're engaged in. You need to talk about your achievements, because the Mandela Washington Fellowship is extremely competitive and it attracts a lot of accomplished young leaders. So it's not going to be easy. Most of us have had to try more than once to just get in. So be prepared to sell yourself, but do it in a genuine and in a way that demonstrate your true heart to the process. And of course, talk about your values, because it's also a very much a value-based fellowship. So you want to demonstrate that the values that you have and the values that they're looking for align. Things like diversity, inclusion, collaboration, open participation, and things like that. So you need to be able to demonstrate that in a meaningful way. Over and above just talking about yourself, you need to talk about your contributions to society. Now, this goes from your professional contributions to your contributions that you do outside of your professional roles, whether you're involved in an NGO, whether there is a feeding scheme that you volunteer for, or that's something that you do at church. Talk about that and talk about what kind of impact that brings to your community and society as a whole. Be genuine about this, be forthright. There's no need to use hyperbole. There's no need to, make yourself sound like the best thing after sliced cheese, but you want to be genuine and assertive in the things that you do and what kind of difference it has made to other people's lives. And then elaborate on how your participation in the actual fellowship will enhance your professional skills and also your impact potential. What do you hope to learn, and what do you think that the experience that you will get from the fellowship will enhance how you do whatever it is that you're doing, whatever that your life is involved in. So be prepared to see that to show that this is the kind of value that I want from the fellowship, and be prepared that you're willing to work hard during the fellowship, in your participation, to try and get as much skills and opportunities as possible to come back and contribute to your home countries, because they really want to develop you, not to just have a CV that says Mandela Washington Fellow 2023, but really, what are you going to do when you get back home that you have learned from the fellowship that will continue to make a difference in your home country? I think that's it, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Chaba. I think you've really closed it off nicely with being the last panelist talking about the three tips. And I think what you're saying mostly is like, just be prepared to talk about yourself, because really this is what the application is all about. So thank you so much for that. And I will open it to just the Q&A. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat box. I do see that there are other questions currently there. So if you do have a question that's specifically to one of my colleagues, you can mention them by name. I do see that there was a question aimed at Lesedi and Ayanda. Ayanda has already answered it, but I will just read it out so Lesedi can just go in depth with what she meant in terms of aligning your goals and your application to the SDG goals and also Agenda 2063. So Takunde says, Lesedi and Ayanda, are you talking about aligning Agenda 2063 and SDG goals in the personal statements? Do you have to specifically say that what I'm doing is aligned with these SDG goals verbatim, or we can leave it to the reader to see the pattern, considering you only have 150 words? So you can just answer Takunde in the way that you think.
All right, I think what Ayanda said is very powerful. Remember, they're going to be going through quite a number of applications. They're not just looking at yours. So they need, say what you mean and mean what you say. Don't leave anything, don't leave any room for assumption, or maybe they just think you just used a word because you thought it works. Make it clear that you understand what is happening globally, and you understand what level of social impact you have through the work that you do. I will do a personal example. Like I said, with the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, there's 17 of them, and I've identified through my organization, we target 3. One being number 5 on the list. It's about gender equality. And then number 10 on the list, which is about reduced inequality. And then number 17 on the list, that speaks to partnering for goals, or partnerships to achieve particular goals. And the reason why I chose to target those particular 3 is because I am a female entrepreneur. I run a 100% Black-owned, female-led digital marketing agency. And I am more favorable towards employing women, purely because in the past, they've missed out on opportunities based on their gender. So I try and bring in, it's a whole thing that we drive with all my organizations, where it's about women empowerment, but also gender inclusion. So I make sure that that is something that is deliberate, that I'm deliberate about when it comes to my application, so that they see that and kind of set you apart from other applicants, because you are saying what you're saying and you're making sure that there's meaning behind it. Also speaking to the plan that you have when you come back from the fellowship itself, tying that into your sustainability goals as well. For me, for example, I said that coming back, I'd like to teach young girls in rural communities how to make use of technology to advance their lives. One being the fact that through technology, we're able to now have access to more jobs without having to now think about urbanization, where you're moving from your village to Johannesburg, and whatever little salary that you'd be getting now goes towards rent. And we all know the struggle and black tax, etc. So technology has sort of helped us to advance how we make a living, and it's made it a little bit more sustainable. So I tied in what I'm doing today, I tied into the goals, and I tied it into the future plans of my organization, or the future plans that I would like to sort of do and implement on the ground when I come back. And I think one of our colleagues earlier spoke about also tying it to specific geographic locations. For me, for example, I'm from a village in Limpopo. So it was very important that I include that, because that is the area where I'm looking to have more impact since returning from the fellowship itself.
Thank you so much, Lesedi. You've answered that beautifully. There was another question that was mainly aimed at Freddie at this point, and I think it really aligns to what Lesedi is saying as well, in terms of making sure that your story, or rather there is a story that you're telling within your application, that you're not having drips and drabs of your different parts of your life in the whole application, like Kiera has also said, but you have to be very specific and tell a cohesive story. So it's easy for the person who's reading it as well. So just earlier on, the question that's mainly for Freddie is like, in the statements, do we always have to share specific stories from our past in answering the questions? For example, how Freddie tackled the DEI question. So Freddie, you can just answer that one. I see you've removed the background, so you can just answer that.
Finally succeeded on doing that. Thank you for the question. I would say yes, and it ties in with I guess another question that I just received in my inbox, to say, you know, how do I maneuver that space where I am being careful to say everything that I need to say, and also don't seem like I'm bragging. And I guess it goes back to that same point, to say they are about 60,000 applications in South Africa alone. It is over 1,000 applications that will be, you know, obviously coming, and you want to separate yourself. And the whole application is about you telling your story. And there's a whole talk about, if you listen to each and every kind of panelist that has come to speak on the platform, they've spoken about impact. Now, impact is measured by actual figures. Impact is measured by actual people that are being impacted, you know, and you want to show all that. So you want your story to be known. So I would say that it's very important to say that as you write your story, and it comes back to a point that I think I said earlier on, to say you don't want it to be, if you're talking about diversity, if you don't include something that is particular to your story, you end up writing an essay or a thesis on what is diversity, and that's not what we want. We want to know, how did you deal with diversity? Where did it happen, and how did you go through it? So I would say that at all points where there is a story that relates, which is still speaking to kind of the story that you needed in the beginning, put it, because it will add value, and it will make us see the person behind all these things that you're speaking about, whether it's actions, it's skills, it's sure. So I would say definitely has, as much as you can, put the examples through.
Thank you so much for that. I think that does wrap up all of the questions that were in the chat box. But I'm sure that each and every one of my colleagues are very open to taking any of your questions in their DMs. If you have something very specific and you want to ask some of the people who are in a specific industry and who took a specific track as well, you are very welcome to contact them. I'm sure they put on their LinkedIn profiles. And I see Ayanda's also putting in her email address. So if you really do want to contact them on LinkedIn, connect with them, connect with me as well. I'm very open to assisting. Others are very open to also reading some of the essay questions. So I know that the applications are due. I think they close this coming week, or the following week they're closing. So do get to them, don't delay, start with them. And I hope that each and every person who is here who's trying to apply to the Mandela Washington Fellowship has already applied and has already started writing some of these essay questions, because they can run away from you, seeing that it's like 150 words. Seems like a lot, but until you start typing and you realize that you're 500 words in and you have to minus it. So to all our panelists, I'm really, really so grateful for all of you, and for also giving us your time to, talk about these application tips, tips and tricks that can help you nail them. All of them are open to helping you with your applications. If you have any other questions, I'm sure you can put them in their LinkedIn profiles. Just to wrap it up, like we said, work on your personal brand, work on your LinkedIn profile, make sure you have Grammarly on this is something Slee mentioned, have Grammarly on your laptop so that you are proofreading it and ask someone else to proofread it. The wonderful thing is that you don't have to go out looking for alumni, you have them right here for you. So everyone is putting them in there. So before we end the call, you can just copy and paste their email addresses and their LinkedIn profiles just so you can be great. But from everyone, from me, from the potential alumni for 2023, I think this should be the end of our session. If you need anything else, we're always happy to help. And I think it really does, the Mandela Washington Fellowship, at the end of the day, you are a community of people. And we're so happy to help each and every one of you, because we want you to have the experience that we had for 6 weeks. And now we're back trying to implement everything that we've learned. So if you do have any other questions, you can put everything in the chat box in your LinkedIn, DM us, talk to us. We're here to help. So yeah, from everyone, all our panelists, you can put your cameras on so we can just say bye to the people. And if you also want to switch on your camera, just looking there, and you want to, just wave to us. Mbali, Mahlatsi, Tabang, Lebohang, anybody, if you want to also switch on your camera just to say hi. People are wearing their ties. How could you be wearing your tie and not switch on your camera? How dare you? But thank you so much. It's been very great. It's been great, very great. If you need anything else, like we said, we are so open to answering your questions in the DM. But anyway, good night, everyone.
Good luck, everyone.
Oh yeah, cheers. Good night and good luck.
All the best.
Recording stopped.